Hi, everyone. I'd like to encourage you to come take your seat, get close. We have a great lineup of speakers. My name is Catherine Kalergis. I'm a senior reporter, residential bureau chief, and South Florida bureau chief at The Real Deal. Over the past few years, dozens of condo projects have been announced in South Florida, from Coconut Grove up to Singer Island, fueled by domestic migration from the Northeast and other parts of the country, as well as foreign demand. Miami is still the place to be, but developers are facing a number of headwinds. Our speakers today have built luxury condo towers in South Beach, downtown Miami, Brickell, Midtown, Sunny Isles. They're experts, so I'm glad to have them today. Thank you all for joining us. I'll kick it off with my first question. What are the biggest challenges condo developers are facing today? Bruce, you want to take that?
Sure. So the key operative word is rising. Rising construction costs, maybe not so much. Rising insurance costs, rising, basically, essentially, costs have risen across the board. And at the same time, as the brokerage community knows, that there is clearly a pause in the market in terms of what it is you can achieve by way of dollars per square foot. So I would say rising.
How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, so I'll echo what Bruce said. Sales are slow in certain sector. Really at the high-end, larger units, we're seeing a certain softness in the market. And as developers, you want to sell through a certain portion of your building. At the same time, you're really breaking ground, because selling a building and waiting 2 years to build, you're going to suffer a cost increase and a narrowing of your margin and your profit. So, for us, it's all really in the condo business, all driven by the sales.
How about you, Carlos?
Yeah, making sure that you find sites with good land base, that allows you to be competitive, particularly at this time of the market where there is obviously an oversaturation of product and a lot of people, coming up with luxury product, trying to find the right size of units and the right price per square foot, to be able to make the projects work. And by work, I mean that you get, 60, 70% sellout before you break ground,
And is that what you did with the standard residences?
Yeah, the standard was, again, a unique case. We were like 80% sold. So we had basically, for a developer, what you really want to make sure is that you have your whole capital stack, in sales, before you start construction. And you continue selling, and the more you sell, the less you use of your construction loan. So hopefully, with what happened yesterday, we will start seeing a bigger migration down to Florida, and that will help, again, accelerate sales, which I think is what we all want to see.
That's a good segue. So Kevin was telling me before that he contributed to Mamdani's campaign. Kevin, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So I was a big fan of Bill de Blasio, because I was pretty sure he was going to do a certain amount of damage to the city. And in that respect, he was a great mayor. And Mondavi, I think, is probably going to end the city. And being an entrepreneur, I think in 5 years we'll go and we'll pick up all the pieces at a very low price point. So we're betting on him, and hopefully he's successful in finishing what Adams and de Blasio started.
What do you think, Bruce? What effect do you see that having on South Florida real estate?
So it really started with de Blasio, carried on, unfortunately, with Mr. Adams, and Mandami is clearly, look, it is a user-unfriendly environment. It used to be that as a developer, you wanted to be able to achieve certain incentives, whether you called that heightened setback variances, whether you called it density, and you had a Department of City Planning that was professional. That what's happened is the city has become very, very unfortunately, dominated by left-wing politicians who do not understand the concept of giving up something to get something. So I am not optimistic that the quality of life in the city of New York is going to be improved. When you cannot walk down a city street and your life is not endangered by someone on an electric bike going the wrong way on the sidewalk, what do? You come to Florida.
Okay. It's the electric bike, everyone. That's what gets you. So I want to go back to construction costs. Are any of you seeing construction costs come down? Obviously, there was a lot of talk with the tariffs, how that would affect the cost of building.
I think the slowdown of the market has sort of helped us in terms of pricing. The GCs are not as busy as they were a year ago, and now everybody picks the phone, and you start to get 3 or 4 bids per sub and per line item. So the reality is that I think everybody's tightening their belts, from the Chinese guys who send us the pipes to the GCs, to the plumbers, to everybody, they all try to continue having a big pipeline of work. So I haven't seen, drastic price increases in construction. The truth is that the last building that I priced was the standard, and I haven't priced the next project yet. But for what I hear from the subs and from the GC companies, prices are sort of stabilizing on the construction side. On the insurance side, also, I think premiums have sort of actually come down a little bit, So again...
You said premiums have come down?
Have come down a little bit, Again, this is my guys of insurance, I don't want to say the names because I know a guy here that's going to make the phone call, very soon. But no, it's the same guy we all use, But the reality is that I think we just need, to continue on the same path. Florida is also at a critical moment. We are going to change. It looks like we're going to change mayors and the direction of the mayors. So I just wish that the new mayor that comes to Miami, continues with the good policies that Francis Suarez did during his tenures, of attracting investment, of being aggressive, his campaign on the billboards, trying to bring people from New York or from California to Miami, I think was amazing. And I hope that whoever wins the election, continues with that same spirit. We are a state of low taxes, and we need to continue in that path to be able to continue growing.
Yeah, the question was construction costs, but I think we're seeing costs come down significantly. Insurance is down. It means pricing may be able to come down a bit over time, but like Carlos said, we get half a dozen bids. 2 years ago, we were lucky if we found a bid. Everyone's looking for business. Tariffs are very counteractive, very dangerous for the country. It's certainly affecting our business, but the slowdown is having a greater effect than the tariffs are in bringing pricing down. Even though tariffs are continuing to push pricing up, the net effect is we're seeing savings in our costs.
Are there economies of scale when you're developing multi-tower projects that you as the developer benefit from?
Yeah, so we probably have a dozen projects here that are under construction, and every sub is looking for the next project, right? So you're kind of holding out that carrot saying, well, I'm starting one over here and I got 3 starting next year over there. I think that's a big benefit. Also buying in bulk. I can buy 4,000 kitchens at one time and 12,000 appliances. That's also very beneficial in terms of getting some economies. Listen, we're in a margin business. There's a certain cost and a certain price, and in the middle there is our profit. So we want to keep costs low, and we'll use economies to get there.
Well, I think it's easier when you're building a rental project if it's multi-tower. When you do multi-tower in a condo, it's a little bit more difficult to recognize savings because typically the buildings need to be distinguished from one another. And you're clearly building with two separate HOAs, so you're not going to have, for example, one plant for two buildings. So a lot of it, I think, depends upon what it is you're building, when you're building it. Obviously, as Kevin suggests, if we're going to do 1,000 kitchens in 1,000 units, you clearly are going to attempt to make a bargain with the kitchen supplier, and then it helps you.
I think, for the ones who have been here, for us, we've been here 25 years building in Miami, and more than the size of the project, it's the constant pipeline of work that you can offer all the subs, and it's the relationship, the relationship of knowing that since 2002, I don't know, we work with John Lee at JMA or with the Moss guys or Coastal or Civic or any of those GCs, that you establish the relationship and that you understand their style and you understand your style. And having a good base of subs that follows you from job to job, that you don't have to repeat the same thing and lose time on the same details from one job to another, that's really, where the savings are.
Yeah, well, time is money, right? I want to talk about profit margins. I know we had discussed, the fact that profit margins for a lot of developers are eroding, but you're still obviously taking the same amount or more risk. How do you make money when your costs are so high and you can only push pricing to a certain point?
I think you still have to be creative in the product, of what you sell, and make sure that you are at a price point that competes against all your competitors. We are all here sitting as colleagues, but at the same time, we all compete, and making sure that you offer more in your project. In the next project that we are doing, Midtown Park, if I'm allowed to interject and to do a little bit of publicity, normally in Miami, projects are, a great kitchen, a great bathroom, a good lobby, an amazing rendering of the amenities, and that's what you get for your $1,500 or your $1,200 a square foot. In the next project that we are doing, which is a huge mixed-use project of 5 acres in Midtown, on top of all that, we are giving buyers 120,000 square feet of retail, 2 parks, a paddle club, a pre-K school, 30,000 gym, 10 restaurants, bars, 2 office buildings, 60,000 square feet of office. So that's when all what you mentioned before really comes to fruition. How do you make sure that you offer more for the same amount that everybody else is offering?
But that sounds expensive.
That sounds expensive, but again, when you do it in a big scale, you're allowed to be able to develop that at a reasonable cost.
Okay.
So I just add a little thing. So when we look at any project, we start off by saying that we underwrite to a 135 ratio. What that means is if we spend $1 billion to build a building, we expect that project to make $350 million, 1.35 of total costs, interest, soft, hard, land, sales costs. Today, because the margins have thinned, we're doing projects probably closer to 120 to 122% of costs. So that's taking that same metric. If I'm going to take a risk to build a $1 billion project like the Waldorf, that project better make at least $250 million or $220 million. That's the underwriting. And from that point on, we have to dig in over months and months, massing, costing, looking at sales, looking at margins, what delays look like. And some projects, if you're in a rising market, you do better than those ratios. But really, that's the minimum we'll look at even to consider looking and underwriting a project. Those are our numbers.
So I think that there's another element to the question, because where it gets tricky as a developer is when you get what happened 3 years ago when there was a substantial spike in construction costs. So if you had a project that you underwrote at $1,200 a foot. When construction costs increase 20 or 25% between the time you've conceived something and the time that you actually wind up building it, that's where on the development side you get hurt. And obviously the hurt is it can go from you make nothing to you make much less. Like Kevin, our metric is basically a metric that's tied to equity. So if a project has $50 million in equity in it, I won't do a project that doesn't underwrite to at least $100 million profit. So my metric is not cost, my metric is risk of equity. But having said that, I've done projects that have made nothing because in essence, the market moved and it moved in a way that, because you got to remember, a real estate project is 5 years. So from the time I look at a piece of dirt, typically it takes you at least a year to get site plan approval. Then it takes you a year to basically have your plans and specs and come to market, maybe 9 months. And then you have some, if it's a condo, some form of pre-sale, and that pre-sale typically requires, if not 50%, darn close to 50%. And then it takes you, and if you start the building during that period of time, it still takes 24 months. So you add those ones and twos up together, and it's 5 years. A lot of things happen in 5 years.
Yeah, and remember also another way of looking at it, the concept of the margin is how much money you can discount your inventory to the point that you can recover everything that you put into the project, you know? Because for us developers, you know, our biggest enemy is time. You know, we are running against time because time for us is uncertainty. You know, is the world going to change? Is construction going to go up? Are sales going to dry up? You know, so that's why, you know, sometimes, you know, when you hear the returns of real estate, you think, oh my God, you know, he's putting $50 million in equity and he wants $200 million out. That's a lot, that's a big multiple. But the reality is that the risks are immense, you know. This is like that you know, that saying, don't try this at home. You know, real estate development at this scale is really a big risk. So we are always running, we're always rushing. We, at least myself, I prefer to pay commissions than to pay marketing. I prefer to pay, you know, commissions than pay for a sales center. You know, if you guys could bring me all a building 100% sold out, I promise you I would give you all my marketing budget to you in the form of commissions.
Okay, so Carlos is paying commissions today?
I am paying, yes.
Okay.
I second that. I want to pay commissions too.
I don't know who doesn't want to pay commissions.
You see, copycats, the same as insurance.
Well, let's cut it. All condo projects, we think we're so smart and we've done such a good job. All of it depends on the brokerage community. Without the brokerage community, there is no condo project. And Bruce makes a very interesting point. I'm just going to add a little bit to that. You want to try and get to a certain sales threshold at the same time you're sticking a shovel in the ground. You do not want to wait because I think he referenced the COVID period where we were getting price increases of probably 12 to 14% a year. And it eroded. People who were selling in the 21 year were really eroding their value by the time they broke ground in 23 or 24. That can happen when you cap your income and you're 90% sold out, you're patting yourself on the back, and all of a sudden costs come up and they crush your margin and you can't even afford to build the building. But really, we love paying commissions because commissions means we have sales. So anybody who's in the brokerage world that's in the audience, thank you, because you're really what's really driving our projects. Yeah.
And that takes care of some of the marketing, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Natural.
And the speed. Again, you're trying to fill in that capital stack, you know. So when you do your numbers, you say, hey, I'm going to put $50 million of equity, I'm going to have a $300 million loan, and then I need, $150 million or $200 million of deposits. That's $400 million of sales.
Yeah.
So just on marketing alone, that's an $8 million budget that you have to get to those $400 million of sales. So if somebody brings me $400 million of sales, I'll give them $8 million commission.
Okay. All right. Everybody
It
heard
doesn't
that?
mean we're going to increase commissions, though.
I did want to ask Kevin, because you mentioned, we were talking about profit margins. So I remember the 11 Residences Tower sold out very quickly, post-pandemic or early, still part of the pandemic. And then you launched 11 Beyond. How did you kind of deal with, the substantial hike in costs?
We just ate it. So, which is a great example. So we underwrote these to Aldo 135 margin, and we had great profits in there. We sold through the first 11 in we did 400 units in 90 days. I think we did 2,100 units in total in 4 buildings. But the way the first 11 is turning out, there's probably about 2% margin left in the building because costs went up by 25, 30% during that period of time. The second 11, there's probably, 18% of margin. The third 11, there's probably, 28% of margin. And the fourth one, we did really well on. So across the board, we're still kind of at that 20%. But the first 11 we're delivering units just above $1,000 a foot in terms of average sales price. And that's where costs are.
Okay.
So it went away effectively.
Buyers have also gotten savvier. A lot of agents I speak to tell me that, they're smarter than they have ever been before. Do you think that's true? Is that what you're seeing?
So you have what I would say is the most educated buyer that I've seen in a very long time. They'll ask questions about not just the amenities, they'll look at who the developer is, what the track record is. It used to be that they were more neighborhood focused. It's now more, and the market really breaks itself down a little bit differently because people that are on the beach, those are buyers that are $10 million plus buyers. The buyer that basically is in the market for 2 bedrooms has X amount of cash. They might like to be in Edgewater, but they have X amount of money to buy a 2-bedroom. And they're going to go where they can afford. So they'll look in 3 different areas, not necessarily because they don't want to be in an area. And they also they're much more knowledgeable in terms of offering plans. They'll actually look at the offering plan, they'll ask intelligent questions, and I think in a lot of ways it's a benefit to us as developers that we have more educated buyers.
Makes sense. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think the buyers obviously we have a lot of repeat buyers, that have bought. In my case, from the beginning, my days at Related, I have guys that continue buying and following what we do. And obviously, you learn from the past, from the previous jobs, and you try to improve, and at the same time add different things that people ask. So it's a dynamic market. I think the buyers are also recognizing the evolution of Miami. When we started developing in Miami, things didn't exist, to think that we're in a city that, 10 years ago, there was nothing in the design district, or, there was not really a Freedom Park in front of downtown Miami, or, we didn't have a lot of things. So this is a city that continues to grow at an amazing, amazing pace, and I think that's the most valuable thing that we have, Each time that we try to get a buyer from Colombia or from Argentina or from Turkey, the first thing you need to sell them on is not your project, it's the belief that Miami is going to continue growing. Miami right now, the city of Miami is ranked number 40 in the US. in
By
terms
what?
of population.
Okay.
So it has a tremendous amount of growth ahead of it, and it's fantastic to be in a place that we continue seeing, growing and growing and growing. We as developers, need to try to push a little bit more what we offer, in the sense we need to try to bring schools, I'm amazed that we still don't have, more private schools in Miami, with the influx of people, and knowing what we know about how, fast the Gullivers, the Ransoms, the Miami-Dade, Country Day fill up. That should be an incredible business in Miami, and the city should do a big effort, putting together all the impact fees that we pay for schools to create more schools. That's the driver for buyers. If you cannot come to Miami and put your kids in a good school, you're not moving to Miami. So we need more schools. And those are things that I think we need to continue insisting and talking with the mayor, with city commissioners, things that are super necessary to continue fueling this pipeline of developments that we have.
One thing that brings buyers in, obviously, is brands. We have a ton of brands, I think probably the brand capital of the country. What types of brands work for condo projects and which ones don't? And feel free to name them.
We're really working with one brand, the Continuum. Oh, no, that's you, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I won't speak to the Waldorf.
Oh, sorry. We'd like to work with the Continuum. Listen, I was never a brand guy myself. I thought quality is quality. People are buying brands because they're looking for certainty of service. Kind of back to the last question. People today, because buyers are educated, they're looking for, and they never did this before, but they're looking at the developer, the quality of the developer, their ability to get out of the ground. Brokers don't want to sell projects just to have a failed launch and not get paid. People don't want to invest their time and effort if you can't get out of the ground. So the developer is very important. And brands kind of follow along with the developer. They're looking for quality and certainty of service. I mean, we're all doing the best kitchens, the best bathrooms, spacious, air and light, great hard surfaces. But really, more than ever, they're looking at the developer, and brands fall right into that category that they want to know that the building's going to maintain a great service for the buyer.
Well, I think that obviously we've spent a lot of time creating a brand that is a brand that everybody in South Florida knows. But the brand, for us, besides quality and besides a name that everybody knows, our projects all have two other things in common. They're all on the water, and I've repeatedly said this, but it seems to be the part of the lunacy of South Florida is you're surrounded by water and nobody can figure out how to get on it. So to the extent that you are on the water and you can access the water, that is a very significant feature that comes with our brand. And I think the third thing, which is true for us, is we're always interested in having a project in which you can access the water by having boat slips as part of the project. Because boating is a significant element for a group of the buyers. So the brand in terms of quality, the brand in terms of access to the water, and the brand in terms of being able to use that water.
I always tell my teams, my sales teams, dress as you are now, with your beautiful high heels and all painted and manicured and beautiful. Go and walk the sites that you're selling at 11 o'clock at night and tell me if you feel safe. That's for me the bigger thing. And then think of what you would like to have in terms of a signature and a brand in that location. A brand helps us sell because we don't have to explain. You know, it's like when somebody wears Lacoste shirts and has that little crocodile, you know, he's saying something, he's telling you something. You know, this is who I am, this is what I like. You don't have to explain it anymore. And brands work exactly the same way. You know, when I say, hey, I'm going to do a project with a standard hotel, everybody knows what the standard is about. You know, everybody doesn't expect that the standard is a Four Seasons or that the standard is, you know, something else. So you are like 2 steps ahead. You don't have to explain what you're selling. The same now with proper hotels, you know, from California, arriving here. They have a beach club in Miami, on Miami Beach, next to, you know, Setai, next to W. So the guys who buy in Midtown have access to the same beach that, if not, would have cost them $5,000 a square foot, you know? So again, those things help accelerate sales. And accelerated sales, you know, are a mitigating factor against time. You know, we go back to the same thing. Who is our enemy? You know, our enemy is time. And brokers like to sell projects that sell fast because they get paid their commissions faster. So that combo, I think that's where the brands help.
How do you select a brand when the market is already so saturated? How does...
You need to keep looking, you know, you need to keep finding people that want to be in Florida. There are so many brands. You know, what I really think is, as a developer, you have to be honest in terms of the brand that you're using. You know, you put the brand of a magazine on a building, or sometimes the brand of a car, you know, on a building. You really think, what's the relationship between what we are doing, what the buyer is experiencing, and what are the benefits, direct benefits to the buyer. So you have to be careful not to exaggerate, you know, the concept of branding, because it's very easy to start focusing on the wrong approach, you know?
Kevin?
I was going to say, we follow the brands around. We'll call Four Seasons, or we'll call Waldorf. We'll call the brands and say, where do you want to be? And they'll tell us where they don't have something and they think it's a strong market. We'll enter that market, regardless where it is in the United States. We'll find that site, and we'll get that project going for them.
Which price segments of the market are the weakest?
My 2 cents is the high end, kind of $5 million plus. Again, it depends where you are. If you're on the beach, you're on the bay, you're inland. But we've seen the most softening in at the higher end right now. At the low end, I mean, the less expensive apartments, probably $1.5 million and less. The velocity of sales in that category is still very vibrant and very strong. At the high end, above $5-10 million, it's a little bit. It's not over. It's just softer. It's as opposed to selling, you know, 1 a week in that category. We're probably selling 1 a month.
Anyone else?
I agree. You know, I rather look for, again, this goes back to the first question that you asked when we started, what's our biggest challenge? And our biggest challenge is being able to find sites where you can produce product that is attainable, you know, that is, you're not hitting for the moon, or you're not hitting for those guys that are, you know, more difficult to get. You know, at that price point, you're competing with home builders. You know, you're
At which price point?
The $10 million units, you know, you're competing with houses. So, you know, do you want to live in a condo? Do you want to live in a house? So again, you enter into a different type of product. So you have to be careful as a developer, you know, not to overextend yourself, you know, in those big units. You know, we normally put them up in the penthouse floors, and hopefully we sell them, and then each time we sell one of those, we open champagne, you know. But the reality is that there's more. You reduce your demand, you know, by only focusing on big units.
Bruce, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that I have nothing to add to either of my colleagues' point. I do think that one of the things that you can do to distinguish yourself, and we spend an awful lot of time. one of the consequences of coming from New York and having developed in New York for 40 plus years. So in New York, a gracious-sized two-bedroom apartment is 1,200 square feet. In Miami, a gracious-sized two-bedroom apartment is 1,800 square feet. Does not have any more bedrooms. So for us, our company, it's trying to identify and spending an awful lot of time on the floor plans to produce a competitive two-bedroom apartment that is less square footage than what we perceive to be in the marketplace. Don't want to cheat on the closet. Don't want to cheat on the bathrooms or the kitchens, but can we be thoughtful, because that 300 square feet is $500,000. And that's very often the difference between a sale and not a sale. So, a thought.
Agreed.
Yep, I agree.
Put big closets.
Which closets?
Big closets.
Big closets, okay. I want to talk a little bit about the state of the market today. Some developers are pulling back on launching new projects. Some projects appear to be stalled, no construction workers in sight. Other developers are pushing forward, launching new developments. We just heard Sam Nazarian, reveal a condo tower in Edgewater. Where are we in the cycle? How do you all view the state of the market?
A lot of the projects you see aren't going to get built. I mean, that's quite obvious. So quite a few stalled projects. A lot of projects suffered what we spoke about earlier, where they priced themselves too low and costs went up, and now it's an unaffordable project. So, a lot of the things, again, the goal is to find the developer that can actually have the horsepower regardless to get out of the ground. So, I look at projects, people tell me about all these great projects. I kind of smile because I know that most of them are never going to get built, certainly in this cycle. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, again...
Except for Bruce and Carlos's projects. I'll just say, when I was a banker in 1981 on Park Avenue, before I became a real estate developer, I'd always look at Bruce Eichner and I'd say, I want to be Bruce when I grow up.
Thank you.
Me too. When I left kindergarten, I saw Bruce's projects and I said, I want to be Bruce.
I'm glad I'm a legitimate
I did a
old
drawing,
guy.
like a little drawing of a stick man. That's Bruce. I want to be like Bruce.
Very kind of you.
I don't know, I'm seeing a lot of salt and pepper hair.
That happened when I was 25.
And I used to be his height.
What do you...
Can I say something?
Sure.
Can we do a little exercise? We did it the last time, and I thought it was great.
That was it, really. This is Carlos.
I want to propose a game to you, because I think it's very important so that you understand, what are the things we really need to fight for, as a community in Miami. I want to play a little game so that you understand from where we all come and from where our buyers come. And the first question I want to ask is, please raise your hand who has their grandparents born in Miami. No, that's a guy with a microphone. He's not raising his hand, So no one here has their grandparents born in Miami. Raise your hand who has their parents, whose parents are born in Miami.
I see 2.
2. Okay, raise your hand. Who of you were born in Miami? And raise your hand, who of you were not born in Miami? Okay, guys, remember, each one of you came to Miami, each one of you needed a condo, and each one of us built one for you, And this is what we need to keep. Miami needs to keep being the easiest gateway to enter into the United States. Right now, that is being challenged one way or another, And what I'm saying is that those are your clients. Remember, we sell, at the Standard, when we launched the project, we had a lot of parents that bought a small unit for their kid who was coming to UM, to FIU, to any of these universities. Those kids right now have difficulty in getting their visas approved, and that slows the market. And that perception that this is a great place to come and do business, that has low taxes, where everybody is welcomed, cannot change. We cannot allow it to change, because that's our business. And our business is all of you who raised your hand that came here. You created the demand, and you changed Miami. Miami was a different city when you guys were not here. So I think that's the most important thing for me in these forums, to understand that we create the demand for our own real estate development, by allowing people to come and being a friendly place.
So I think that the biggest challenge for our community and your community is the lack of housing for workforce people. Workforce is defined by AMI, and basically, unless cities like Miami, New York has failed dismally at this, which is one of the reasons why a person like the current mayor was elected, because people are angry about the fact that my doorman in my building lives in Pennsylvania. He can't even afford to live in New Jersey. So the issue, and it's already, people are being forced out of Miami-Dade County who are basically regular, ordinary workers, people who work in hospitals, got to figure out how to build 100% workforce housing, and the government has to play a role in this. So just from a developer who builds luxury condominiums, none of the people who build the building can afford to live in the building they built. Something wrong with that picture.
I don't know. What do you want
Wait,
to...
what was the question?
The question was, where are we in the cycle? But we deviated.
We deviated to
We
a more
already answered
interesting
that question.
We deviated, sorry.
Yeah, anyway, we're building thousands. We have a big affordable housing division, and we're currently doing a couple or a few thousand affordable units in Orlando, Tampa, New York City, and other places. So we also believe, like Bruce does, that as cities grow and services increase, you have to house people in a fair and affordable way. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up. We have a 15-minute break, but I want to thank our speakers. Give them a round of applause. And make sure to come back for our residential brokerage panel.
Do we have some gift bags or something?
Yeah, in the next room.